What would you do if your phone rang in the dead of night from your own number? And when you answered, a chilling voice asked, "Do you value your own self-worth?" For Maria, this was just the start. It began with a few missed calls, but as the mystery unfolded, the truth revealed far more than she expected. At night, Maria's phone began to vibrate softly on her nightstand. She glanced at the screen and saw her own number. For weeks, she had ignored these strange calls, dismissing them as spam. But this night was different. With her boyfriend Stephen asleep beside her, Maria decided to answer. The voice on the other end was cold, yet deeply unsettling as it spoke. "Do you value your own self-worth, Maria?" There was something deliberate about it, so precise, so unnerving, that Maria couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was behind it knew her personally. Maria hesitated for a moment, her heart quickening as she clutched the phone. Finally, she managed to ask, "Who is this?" But before she could get a response, the line went dead, leaving her sitting in the dark, her thoughts racing. Was it a prank, someone she knew, or something worse? The unease settled over her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this call was more than just a random occurrence. Maria gently shook Stephen's shoulder to wake him up. Groggy and disoriented, he listened as she explained the strange phone call. With a dismissive yawn, he muttered, "Ignore it, Maria. It's probably just spam or a bad joke. Let's not overthink it," before rolling over and closing his eyes again. Maria frowned, the uneasy feeling from the call lingering in her chest. The voice on the other end hadn't sounded like a joke. It was too deliberate, too unsettling. What if it was something more? What if someone was watching her? She tried to push the questions away, but a small part of her couldn't help wondering if this wasn't random at all. She laid in bed restless, but decided not to wake Stephen again. For now, she would keep her suspicions to herself. Maria met Stephen on a casual night out with friends in San Francisco. She hadn't expected much more than a fun evening, but there he was, sitting alone at a table. He struck up a conversation, charming and polished. He was in town on one of his many business trips. He explained that he lived in Los Angeles, but his work kept him traveling frequently, especially to San Francisco. By the end of the evening, Stephen had convinced her to exchange numbers, assuring her that he'd be back in town often. Their connection grew quickly, and Maria appreciated the balance their long-distance dynamic offered. She could focus on her demanding work while still enjoying their blossoming relationship. They each shared snippets of their lives as they got to know each other better. He had a daughter, he said, but reassured Maria that his relationship with his ex had ended years ago, and they hadn't spoken in a long time. As much as Maria enjoyed their connection, she sometimes found herself marveling at how quickly things were progressing. They had only known each other for a couple of months, but their bond felt natural and easy. Despite the short time, her trust in him was growing steadily, and she couldn't help but feel optimistic about where things were headed. Maria walked into the office with a happy smile, still thinking about the surprise trip Stephen had planned. On Friday evening, just as she was finishing a long work week, he showed up at her door with a grin and a suitcase. The weekend felt like a dream. He took her to a small coastal town where they enjoyed peaceful sunrises, tasty seafood, and a massage on the beach. Back at work, she was greeted by an unexpected sight: a bouquet of flowers on her desk. While the gesture was sweet, the flowers triggered her severe allergy, leaving her puzzled. Stephen wouldn't send flowers, he knew better. Maria called him to confirm. "Did you send flowers to my office?" "Flowers? No," Stephen replied, sounding confused. Her confusion deepened. There was no card, and Stephen teased that it might have been a secret admirer. Maria brushed off the incident, chuckling at Stephen's playful suggestion about a secret admirer. She told herself it was likely just a well-meaning co-worker who didn't know about her allergy. Still, as she went about her day, questions about the flowers lingered in her mind. By the end of the workday, curiosity got the better of her. She casually asked a few colleagues if they'd sent the flowers, but everyone either shook their heads or seemed genuinely surprised to hear about them. For now, she tried to shrug it off, but as she left the office that evening, she found herself glancing over her shoulder, wondering if the flowers had been more than just a simple gesture. Over the next 2 months, Stephen couldn't make it back to San Francisco. Work kept him busy, and while Maria missed him, they stayed connected through phone calls and texts. Life moved on as usual, at least it seemed that way. But then these strange calls started. The first time her phone buzzed late at night, Maria answered, expecting a telemarketer or an accidental call. Instead, silence filled the line. She frowned, checked the screen, and froze. The call was coming from her own number. Probably some glitch, she muttered to herself, setting the phone down and returning to bed. But the calls kept coming, always in the middle of the night. At first, Maria brushed them off as a technical error or a prank. Yet as the weeks passed, the calls grew more unsettling. The voice on the other end, low and emotionless, began to speak. "I saw you in your blue blouse today," the caller said one night, referencing the outfit Maria had worn to work. Her heart raced as she stared at the phone in her hand. The realization struck like a cold wind. Someone was watching her. When Maria brought it up to Stephen during their phone conversations, he dismissed her concerns. "It's probably one of your co-workers playing a prank," he said lightly. His nonchalance frustrated her. This isn't a joke, Stephen. They know what I'm wearing. They're watching me." But Stephen didn't seem to take her seriously. Maria felt the gap between them widening with every conversation. That night, as if the caller knew, her phone buzzed again at 2 a.m. "Do you think Stephen's daughter knows about you?" the voice whispered. Maria's blood ran cold. She hung up immediately, her hands trembling as she tried calling Stephen. No answer. She tried again and again until finally he picked up. "What, Maria?" he snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. "Someone called me again," she said quickly. "They mentioned your daughter, Stephen. This is serious." His tone turned defensive. "Leave my daughter out of this. She has nothing to do with it. I didn't bring her into this. They did!" Maria shot back. But Stephen wasn't listening. "Enough, Maria. I'll be in town at the end of the week. We'll talk about this then," he said, his voice colder than she'd ever heard it. He hung up before she could say another word. For the next few days the calls stopped, but the unease didn't. Maria went through her routine, feeling eyes on her everywhere she went. She avoided talking to Stephen, unsure of what to say after their argument. Maria sat across from Stephen in her small apartment, the city lights casting faint shadows across the room. He had just arrived in town after weeks apart, and their earlier tensions seemed to melt as they talked. Stephen opened up about his stress, work pressures, the challenges of being a father, and the uncertainties of starting a new relationship. His vulnerability felt genuine, and Maria found herself softening toward him. That night, Stephen stayed at her apartment. They both settled into bed, Maria still unsure about the direction of their relationship, but willing to give it time. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. Half asleep, she grabbed it, expecting some random notification. But instead, a familiar chill ran down her spine as she saw the caller ID, her own number. She hesitated before answering. "The man sleeping next to you is not who he seems to be," a voice whispered. The line went dead. Maria's heart raced as she stared at Stephen, peacefully asleep beside her. Panic surged through her and she shook him awake. Stephen blinked groggily, then sat up with a deep sigh. "Maria, I need to come clean about something." She braced herself as he continued. "My ex, she's psychotic. She's probably the one behind this. She's crazy and jealous and can't let go. She's stalking you because she knows we're together." Maria felt her stomach twist. "And you didn't think to tell me this before? You let me walk into this blindly?" "I thought I could handle it. I didn't think she'd go this far," Stephen said defensively. "You lied to me," Maria shot back, her voice rising. "About her. About everything. How can I trust anything you say now?" The argument escalated, emotions running high. By 4 a.m., Stephen had grabbed his things and left, slamming the door behind him. Maria sat on the couch, stunned, her mind racing. The man she thought she knew felt like a stranger. In the days that followed, she avoided Stephen's calls and decided their relationship was over. She needed to focus on her own safety and peace of mind. Then the package arrived. It was left at her doorstep with no return address. Curious but apprehensive, Maria opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of photographs of her, walking to work, shopping for groceries, sitting at her favorite coffee shop. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Someone had been watching her for weeks. Beneath the photos was a note, scrawled in sharp, deliberate handwriting. "You were just another layover. Congratulations. You can have him. I'm taking him for all he's worth in the divorce." Maria's hands shook as she pulled out the final item, a copy of Stephen's marriage certificate. Her breath caught in her throat. He was married, still married. It all made sense now. The calls, the photos, the whispered warnings. His wife had hired someone to track him, to track her. The man she had trusted had lied to her from the start. Maria sat there in stunned silence, the pieces falling into place. Stephen wasn't just hiding his ex. He was hiding a life she hadn't known existed. And now she was caught in the crossfire of a crumbling marriage and a bitter, vengeful wife. She placed the contents back in the package, her decision firm. This chapter of her life was over. The man she thought she knew had shown his true colors, and she wanted no part of the mess he'd left in his wake. Subscribe now to our channel, where we dive into real stories from viewers and the web. Stories so unsettling they'll linger in your mind and make you see the world a little differently. Send us your story and join the growing community of mystery seekers. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore tales of the sleepless.